Sinai Desert, Peninsula of Serabit el Khadim, approximately 1900 before Common Era. The scorching sun punishes the enslaved workers and Semitic mercenaries extracting turquoise for the unattainable glory of the pharaohs of Egypt. On the walls of these dark and suffocating mines, Egyptian overseers have carved complex hieroglyphs to honor their deities. The Canaanite miners watch them. They do not know how to read. They do not understand the intricate imperial grammar. However, amidst the dust and exhaustion, the mind of one of these illiterate workers is about to take a cognitive leap that will forever destroy the intellectual monopoly of the greatest empires in history. He will take a sacred drawing, empty it of its millennial meaning, and turn it into a simple sound. How is it possible that the most marginalized and least educated men of the ancient world forged the most powerful weapon of human civilization, inventing the alphabet that you and I use at this precise moment? Today, we unearth the mystery of the greatest intellectual revolution of humanity. Welcome to the mines where hieroglyphs were transformed into ideas. To understand the true magnitude of this anthropological earthquake, we must go back to the very dawn of civilization, when humanity began to organize itself into massive urban structures. Around the year 5000 before Common Era, in the vast plains of Mesopotamia, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, society experienced an unprecedented demographic transformation. Human beings who, just fractions of evolutionary time ago, were hunters and gatherers, began to group together in megacities. As these colossal metropolises arose, an imperious and inevitable need emerged: administration. The leader could no longer memorize how many sacks of grain the temple possessed, nor how many heads of cattle had to be delivered as tribute. It was in this context of bureaucratic pressure that writing was born. Cuneiform writing was not invented by poets to capture the beauty of the dawn, nor by theologians to record divine revelations. It was invented by administrators to manage the economy, record laws, and control the immense resources of the city-state. 800 years of technical evolution had to pass before those early accounting signs, around 3200 before Common Era, matured enough to capture complex literature, prayers, hymns to the gods, and the great national epic of Gilgamesh. Simultaneously, in the south, along the majestic Nile River, the Empire of Egypt developed its own recording system, hieroglyphs. This system was an aesthetic and symbolic marvel, but it possessed an overwhelming level of complexity. It consisted of hundreds, and in some periods, thousands of ideographic, phonetic, and determinative signs. Learning to read and write in Egypt or Mesopotamia required decades of exhausting study and exclusive dedication. This immense technical difficulty generated one of the most formidable socio-political barriers of antiquity, the monopoly of the scribes. Royal scribes were an untouchable elite, the true cogs of imperial power. They controlled information, the economy, justice, and religion. Knowledge was literally and absolutely synonymous with power. The vast majority of the population lived in the darkness of illiteracy, subjected to the decisions of those few who held the key to writing. And right in the middle of these two imperial colossi, on a narrow land bridge bathed by the Mediterranean Sea, lived the peoples of Canaan. The Canaanites lived in the shadow and under the constant influence of Egypt and Mesopotamia, watching with wonder and fear the impenetrable writing systems of their masters, unaware that they themselves would be the ones to cause them to collapse. The anthropological conflict and the core of our story erupt far from the grand palaces, in the desolate and unforgiving turquoise mines of Serabit el Khadim, deep in the Sinai Peninsula. During the 19th and 18th centuries before Common Era, the Egyptian Empire organized vast expeditions to extract precious minerals. For these dangerous tasks, the pharaohs employed or enslaved workers, mercenaries, and guides of Canaanite origin. These individuals of Semitic origin found themselves immersed in an environment visually saturated with Egyptian culture. Everywhere, Egyptian scribes and priests had carved beautiful hieroglyphs to invoke the protection of Hathor, the deity they called the Lady of Turquoise. The Canaanite workers looked at these sacred images, but their minds were not conditioned by the years of bureaucratic indoctrination of the scribal schools in the Nile Valley. They did not understand that a hieroglyph could represent an abstract concept, a syllable, or a silent determinative. Being free from the chains of formal Egyptian education, these Canaanites applied a rudimentary, brilliant, and completely disruptive logic. They observed the drawing of a familiar object, pronounced the name of that object in their own Canaanite mother tongue, and decided to use that drawing to represent solely and exclusively the first sound of that word. This cognitive leap is what linguists and historians call the acrophonic principle. The genius of this mechanism is astonishing in its simplicity. Let us observe the specific discoveries made by archaeology in the rocks of Sinai. The Canaanites saw the Egyptian hieroglyph representing the head of an ox. In their Semitic language, ox was called Aleph or Aleph. They took the shape of the ox's head with its horns and used it to write the sound of the letter A. They saw the drawing of a house. In their language, house was called bayit. That drawing became the sound B. They saw the symbol of rippling water. Water in their language was Mayim. That symbol came to represent the sound M. They observed the figure of a snake. Snake was pronounced Nahash, and the symbol became the letter N. They contemplated a goad used to direct animals. The goad was called Lamed, becoming the letter L. They saw a simple mark or cross used for signing. This mark was Tav, and it became the letter T. Through this pragmatic and rebellious deconstruction, the Canaanite miners achieved what no imperial scholar had imagined. They reduced the thousands of signs necessary for human communication to a simplified system of just over 20 visual symbols. Without realizing it, they had just created the Proto-Sinaitic alphabet, an information technology so light, versatile, and accessible that it was destined to spread like an uncontrollable fire throughout the ancient world, threatening to destroy the traditional hierarchies of knowledge. The climax of this invention did not stop in the mountains of Sinai. This revolutionary spark of human genius quickly escaped from the mining camps and traveled to the vibrant city-states of Canaan. There, the new technology was adopted and perfected by the Phoenicians, the great masters of navigation and international trade of antiquity. The Phoenician merchants immediately understood the immense value of a writing system that anyone could learn in a matter of days, and they carried it with them on their swift ships across the entire Mediterranean Sea. When this Semitic alphabet reached the islands of the Aegean Sea and the coasts of Greece, the most decisive cultural transfer for our Western civilization took place. The Greeks adopted the Canaanite and Phoenician symbols and adapted them to their own language. The ox's head, the Aleph, was visually rotated and transformed into the letter Alpha. The house, the Bayit, became Beta. The animal goad, the Lamed, transformed into Lambda. The cross, the Tav, became Tau. Later, the Etruscans and Romans inherited and modified these shapes again, consolidating the Latin alphabet, exactly the same visual code that you are using to read, write, and process thought in the modern world. But the deepest anthropological and historical revelation of this event transcends simple calligraphy. The alphabet was the first great democratizing agent of knowledge in the history of humanity. By simplifying writing, the absolute monopoly of scribes, priests, and divine kings was forever destroyed. It was no longer necessary to belong to a privileged elite to record thoughts, laws, or memories. This monumental innovation set the geopolitical and theological stage for the next great revolution of antiquity: ethical monotheism. The writing of extensive and complex sacred texts, such as the Hebrew Bible, and its function as a manifesto for an entire people was only socially viable because there was an alphabet that the general population could learn and understand. The biblical mandate that requires every individual to read and teach the law to their children depended intrinsically on this ease of transmission. The concept of a portable God and a nation united not by stone monuments, but by the study of a book, is the direct result of that spark of intellectual rebellion that occurred in the desert. The true heritage of the Canaanites is not found in ruined temples, but in every letter we pronounce. They taught us that an idea, when accessible to everyone, becomes completely immortal and more resilient than any empire forged by the sword. Archaeology has shown us that the most transcendental tools of human civilization are often born on the margins of society, created by those whom official history usually ignores. The alphabet was not a gift from kings, but the pragmatic genius of workers who needed to make themselves understood. Now, the anthropological question is for you. In our contemporary era, do you consider that new information technologies are democratizing knowledge in the same way the alphabet did? Or are we creating a new elite of digital scribes who control the truth? I invite you to express your arguments and generate a rigorous debate in the comments section. If you value this level of analytical depth and historical research, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and share this content. This is part of our series, Chronicles of Thought. Until the next chapter on our channel, Jewish History, Evidence and Truth.